Hello, this is Rabbi Dr. Juan Marcos Barjona Gutierrez, and today we're looking at the concept of Sheol and the continuation of life in some form or fashion for the dead. We're looking at two passages from Genesis, and in a second slide in a different video, we'll continue this theme. The dead continue after a fashion in this place of Sheol, the abode of the dead, the netherworld, after their earthly life. We look at as an example of Jacob who mourns for Joseph and is discussing also in a second passage potentially mourning for Benjamin if his son goes down to Egypt. And in the first section, Genesis 37:35, we read, "V'yakumu chol banav v'chol benotav le'nachamo, v'yama'en lechitnachem, v'yomer ki ered el beni avel she'ola, v'yevek Oto Aviv," and all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "Nay, but I will go down to the grave to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. Now, one could argue that the implication of this verse is simply that Jacob will mourn, and as a consequence, he'll die, or that he'll continue to mourn until the day he dies. But there's sort of almost, if you will, an active, ongoing aspect to this, that even as he goes into Sheol, if he leaves his life, the mourning process will continue. And I think if you look at, I think a good way to think about it is if you think about Hades in Greek mythology, where the individual bears their status in this life in Hades. You think about the story of Oedipus Rex, for example. In that particular case, of course, Oedipus blinds himself so that he won't have to be confronted with the things that he's done in this world, a sign of regret, but that blindness continues into Hades. There's almost a little bit of a reflection of that. I'm not saying it's an exact parallel, but it's a possibility of a notion that a person who mourns in this world will mourn for their children or whatever it is in the next. In Genesis 42:38, we also read, "Vayomer lo yered beni imachem, ki achiv met v'chu levado nish'ar, ukra'achu ason baderech asher telchu va, v'chol rattem et saveti beyagon she'olah." And he said, and again, this is Jacob, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is only left. If harm befall him by the way in which ye go, then you will bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave." And again, you could argue it many different ways, but I think that there's an indirect implication here that one can go into Sheol in sorrow, and that continues. In a second slide that we'll look at in a separate video, we will look at the status of the dead, again, bearing the nature of their existence in this life. In many cases, it's a consequence of judgment or punishment, but we'll look at that, and then we'll continue our discussion on these different facets of Sheol as they're understood by different writers of the Tanakh, and then eventually, of course, different pieces of literature in the Second Temple period.